love my good God. Yes.
So here we are, we're still continuing with our normal conversations, no usual conversations, no conversations. On Mondays, let's talk. What did I just say? Let's talk with Sam and Purity. And today it's a very, I don't know, I wouldn't want to say it's a depressing topic, but it's a topic on depression.
It's a catchy topic. Let's be safe. Let's play safe.
Yeah, it's a downcasted.
Downcasted topic.
Anyway, but Sammy, what's your take about depression? Do you have an experience?
Definitely.
What are some of the myths we've heard about depression?
Myths.
Like lately it's one of those terms that it's commonly used. It's one of the common things, just talk and someone is like, man, me, I'm depressed.
Well, one of the misconceptions or myths that I know or that I have experienced about depression is the fact sometimes, one, I know that depression is unfair. And that it's a myth. Depression is not unfair. And two, that depression only happens to me and not to other people. That is, let me call it pain, struggles, they only happen to me. Yeah. I don't know about you.
For me, I think one of the misconceptions about depression is it's like everything that happens around, like you're late for work and there's too much traffic and then you hear someone.
That's depression, man.
Well, me, I'm depressed. Do you
That's
even know the
depression.
meaning of that word? Or someone is hungry, like hungry, not angry, but someone is hungry and they just need food. And when you're like, hey, what's up? They're like, I'm depressed.
Yeah.
The highlight, one of the funniest I heard, hey, okay, this gender called male, this species,
We are not depressed.
they're not depressed, but they can pull that as a card, a guilt-tripping card. Please come and see me, I'm depressed.
Nitatuma fair.
Hi babe, please come and see me, I'm depressed. I just need your company. Like, really, can you even identify when you're depressed? Can you even be there like, yeah, I think this is depression crumbling in?
Yeah. I think you can identify. One thing I believe, in one way or the other, all of us, we've been depressed at any given time. I mean, because depression is about, I would call it's a mood disorder, something like that. And for all of us, me, you, and people out there, at some given point, we had some mood disorder where we felt like I'm really, really sad, and I got sad for like a whole week, for like a whole month, probably. So at some point, everyone gets depressed.
Depression.
Yes.
I don't know. It's quite interesting, but we'd like to invite you. You can share your comments or sentiments in regards to depression. What do you think about it? What's your take on it? Do you think Christians go through this? Do you think it's something that we need to talk about? Why bother about it?
And maybe the other question is it maybe right or wrong to be depressed? Because some would say it's wrong to be depressed. I mean, it's wrong to worry too much, because if I could remember, if I could quote the Bible, it says, "Do not worry about tomorrow." Yes, I mean,
the birds in the sky.
Yes, do not
worry. They are fed. They are clothed.
Exactly.
And, the beasts in the fields.
Do not worry about what you will eat tomorrow, what you will feed on tomorrow, what you will dress on tomorrow. So probably depression could be wrong, could be a sin. I don't know. So you guys, feel free to share with us. Tell us, what do you think?
I personally think that depression it's not just anxiety and worry, but it is mental. It's mental, and I also believe it's spiritual. It's a mental disorder, as scientifically stated, that it can be due to the funniest of it, or rather the most complex one, it's hormonal imbalance. How can it even cause depression? I don't know. I'm not into bio that much. And chemistry, those are... I still appreciate my teachers' efforts. But...
Wait, are you trying to say chemistry was useless for you?
Not my words, but yours.
I'm just asking.
Not my words, but yours. Yeah, for me, when I'm thinking of it as a mental disorder where you just can't do much. You're outlaid. You're feeling sad and angry and worried and anxious all of a sudden, all at the same time. You don't want to be around people. Depression for me feels like I just do not have strength. Like I'm weak and weary and feeble and I'm vulnerable to nothing and everything at the same time. It's just something.
Sure.
And at the same time, I believe that it can be spiritual because the enemy, I believe the enemy, the devil, who's, keeps on growing around and finding reasons to pinpoint, to accuse us on. I believe it's a tool that he does.
Sure.
Because I believe depression also turns, or rather pulls a lot of fear in it.
Yeah, I actually agree with you. And maybe to add on it is, depression is a mood disorder that involves a persistent feeling of sadness and loss of interest. You see, for example, like there are so many activities that I do each and every day. But there are days, for example, I play football, I do this here, talking, what else? I sing, I play guitar, all that. And there are moments, or rather there are times where probably sometimes you just lose interest of playing football. And it's something that I love.
Will that mean that you're depressed?
At some point.
I don't think so, Sammy.
I mean, you just wake up.
And you're just tired. Your body is not willing to play football.
No. You're not tired. There's no interest.
It does not mean you're depressed.
So you're okay.
Sammy,
what do you call that? What do you call that?
Explain this. I love morning walks. I love morning walks by myself. The 45 minutes of just walking for leisure by myself, listening to music or a podcast or nothing, and just walking very early in the morning or late in the evening when there are not so many people around. But all of a sudden, I have too much in my plate to handle. And I figure out that I have really late nights.
Yes.
I have really early mornings that I need to accomplish a few things. And sometimes it's hard to squeeze those 30 very important minutes for me. It does not mean I'm depressed. It does not mean I'm depressed. Because I want to do it. I am actually willing to do it. But I just can't. When you do the math of 4 hours of sleep or 3 hours of sleep and a walk, like there's that balance.
I understand you. But my point here is, I'm here, I'm free, and there's just no interest in doing something that I love. As in, there's no interest, total interest. Leave alone me being tired. I agree, sometimes I can be tired. I'm too tired even to go to play football, to do something that's okay. But I'm here, I'm free, I have energy, but there's no interest.
I believe there should be more to it than just it being depression.
That more now is depression.
So the more to it is, like the symptoms more to it will be, you're angry at people, you don't want to see people, you're scared of something, you're anxious on something, you're angry about something. But at the same time, it could also just be, I don't know, metamorphosis.
Na leo umekuja na hizi vitu meta-angawa.
I don't know. So
I mean, things like, you see, like drastic change of appetite. Do you experience that?
Yeah.
Sometimes you feel like,
sometimes I want to eat.
Exactly.
Some of the days that I eat, after every 2 hours I'll have to. And the days when the day ends and I don't realize I even did have a meal.
And you don't even feel like having a meal.
I'll be like, maybe I'm supposed to have a meal.
You're not even sure. You don't feel like your stomach is empty or anything.
That's not depression.
What is that? What is that called?
Lack of appetite.
Caused by?
Metamorphosis.
Or even sometimes, I mean, you're just there. I mean, have you been, I mean, you've done nothing, but you feel you're tired.
A lot of times. I actually get tired when I've not done something. That's beauty on a normal day. Like I wake up in the morning.
And you're tired.
And I'm just tired. Very, very, very often. Especially if I have slept for long. That following day I'll be just...
So that sleeping makes you tired?
Yeah, sometimes.
Wow. When I grow up, I want to be like you.
Please don't. It's not exciting.
I want to sleep long and get tired.
You wake up... No, normally, how I function actually is I can have 2 or 3 weeks very consistent, sleeping 4 hours, 3 hours a night, and then all of a sudden one day I'm just out of the office at 5, and I am tired. I'll go to my room, get a shower, jump to the bed at around 5:30. I'll wake up the following day at around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I'll be tired. I'd still be like, it's 1 o'clock. Amka. Wake up, prepare. Get something to eat, freshen up, and do something more. And then I'll wake up, shower, get something to eat, and then get back to bed because I'm tired and lazy. And it's just a normal way of the body.
So you're not depressed?
No.
You're just tired and lazy.
Yeah. And I just want my company.
And maybe, do you sometimes feel like I mean, it gets difficult for you to think? For you to concentrate or even make decisions?
Making decisions can be difficult sometimes.
I mean, it could be
a change of value.
It could be a simple decision, like just putting sugar into tea. Then you're thinking like, should I not? It could be just a simple decision as that.
Simple decisions that I struggle with, Sammy. To be honest, is when I'm working in the supermarket and.
No, that's a girl problem.
Thank you. At least I know how to finish that chocolate ice cream. Girl problem.
That's a girl problem.
Yeah, but there are times when things are just different, which I believe it's not necessarily depression. But when it's consistent and it's probably takes longer. Because
persistent, yeah.
Yeah, it's where it can be wrapped as depression. Because the symptoms, if you look at the symptoms, how it is put in a scientific way, or rather the way the scientists,
the learned people put it.
Are they learned? The researchers,
so
the researching people.
They're not learned.
I didn't say that.
Okay.
It's more of symptoms, and when you look at the symptoms that we have, are more like things that we can simply assume on, things that we can't notice easily sometimes, not unless you're very cautious and careful about it. Like a given story, some years back, I lost one of my cousins on suicide. Like he killed himself. He was a guy whom we had studied with from primary school. Like we are related somehow. These African families, but that one I'm sure we are related because since grade 1 to 8 we're in the same school, and every time we used to be reminded that that's my cousin. And after high school, he gets to finish school, gets to go to campus or college, and then afterwards, no one even noticed that there was a problem. But one morning they just found him hanged, and there was a letter there. So some of his friends, when all this was happening, because after you've grown up, you all have different places of work, or like you can't hang out as before. So some of his friends, when even they were circulating this memo, some of the friends stated of how then they just knew him, he was okay. He was fine. The only probably different things they will notice were that he will not hang out as often. He probably was quiet. He probably was was not feeding as usual.
Mm-hmm.
He had changed a bit,
Mm-hmm.
but they were not things that you would clearly tell.
Sure.
And he had left a letter which clearly stated
Mm-hmm.
he was struggling with mental health and
Mm.
depression. And he was, as the Bible would say, he was downcast and weary. And what other terms does the Bible use?
Burdened.
Yeah, he was burdened. He had a heavy heart.
Mm-hmm.
He probably was walking through the valley of shadow of death for a long time, and no one noticed.
Sure.
So, and I think that's a good point to start upon, on how we can have symptoms, and it does not mean, like, we can be experiencing things and changes in life and our normal routines, but it does not necessarily mean you're depressed.
Sure.
Yeah. Think about this, Sammy. Having a conversation with your mom. We imagine your mom now telling you, "If you want to tell me you're depressed, come, my son, let's have a conversation about this." Imagine about it. Think about it, because our parents' time, this was not a conversation. And it does not mean that I'm ruling out. It's something that is there and it's existing. But I believe that with the society today, it has built up a reason as to why we have an increase of mental health issues, an increase on depressed people, and it has led to an increase of societal cases and stuff. So I don't know, maybe I can pose this to you, Sami. What do you think? Has society got anything to do? Do we have changes of value? What do you think has built up to this?
First, I mean, it's important to note. I did a little research on that. We have like more than 264 million people who are depressed. Those are the current figures. More than 264 million. Out of the 7 billion that we have, that is around 3% of human beings currently are depressed. And it's quite sad, like you said. There are some of us that we can be depressed and we don't even know. We are not even sure if we're depressed, because we don't notice these little changes that are happening in our lives. I mean, I can lose appetite just like that. Then I'll feel like, that's normal. I mean, there are good days and bad days, right? There are days where I feel like eating, there are days where I don't feel like eating. And then I just take it for granted and move on. Or maybe I sleep too much or too little. You see, like the example you gave, you have slept for 12 hours and then you are tired. I mean, to me, that's kind of ironic. Because you rest a lot. I'm supposed to wake up so very energetic. But then, but then I wake up very, very tired. Now, those little red flags, we don't notice. And we even get to points where we go through things. Now, there are accents where we actually get to notice that we are depressed, that we are getting into trouble, that we are going through pain. And you know, depression at its worst, it leads to suicide, just like the example you gave. And I also checked a few statistics on suicide. It says close to 800,000 people, they commit suicide every year. That means every 40 seconds, one person commits suicide in a year. Like just now, we've been talking for around 20 minutes. And if we try to calculate, that's around maybe 15 people or something have already committed suicide since we started talking
Having a conversation.
Yes. And isn't that sad? For me, that's really, really terrible. And I feel like at some point, this is something that needs to be addressed. Because, I mean, the numbers that are getting, as little as, in fact, the statistics, they say from the age of 15 to 29, that's where it's more rampant. As young as 15.
And it's quite interesting thinking about it as young as 15. You know, when I was 15 years old, I probably did not know what depression was. Like, it was not part of the vocabulary at that time. And thinking about it with the older age and the older people, how they handled things and how they handled situations, it was quite different from how we do it today. Because from how, a given example, the African setup, from how it was before, it was more of a community. It was more of this is how we do things, these are our values, these are our traditions, and as a community, your problem is my problem, and my problem is your problem. My burden is your burden, and your burden is my burden.
Sure.
And there was not too much judgments, and I think they also were not exposed to so much that brought up words like depression. Imagine depression in Kuyu.
They can't even say depression.
Depression.
Don't kill the Kikus.
So I'm thinking, if we look at that particular setup, then what used to happen was, we'd live in a clan where we only had enough, like having a shamba that gave us food, having cattle that you take care of, having time for your family and friends and the neighborhood. Like that was just enough.
Sure.
That was just enough. And you sure knew, if for example we didn't have food, I'd easily get it from my neighbors. A normal, one of the common terms in Swahili, we usually say kuomba chumvi, kwa jirani. And there was no shame on that.
Sure.
There was no problem with that. It was nothing bad. But now we come in a society where we want more, we long for more, we search for more, and we are basically defined with what we have at hand. We are defined with the amount of money we have, we are defined with the size of the house we have, we are defined with the type of foods we eat. And when we look at it, Sammy, it places us in a position where we are constantly in a sad mode. We are constantly searching for more. We are constantly geared to want what we don't have. And sadly enough, sometimes it's what we don't need. And then we shift our focus to that. Because imagine, Sammy, the number of, the cases of depression that we've heard, it's probably because I'm not capable of getting what I want. If you're someone who beats yourself too hard, you'd probably fall into depression because, you've been working hard all your life in academics. You've graduated with a first-class honors in campus, and afterwards you do not get a job. 4 years down the line, even just 2 years down the line, Sammy. It puts you in a position where you're constantly having self-pity to yourself. You're angry about everything, including God. You're anxious about what next. What does tomorrow hold? You're probably angered. Why did I have to do all that hard work? And if you're in our era where the teachers used to say, like hard work pays. It has never changed. It actually pays. But it was a huge thing if you worked hard. If you never showed signs of working hard, then you were out.
Sure.
So thinking about it, and then here you are, your friends who were probably last in the class, probably didn't go to campus, probably didn't experience all these things, are the ones who are running businesses that are really successful. It places you in a position where you miss out even to realize and to recognize what you have. It makes you not be able to even see that there's hope for tomorrow. It puts you in a position where you cannot see the beauty of you having that good grade. That it wasn't just by yourself. It helps you. It puts you in a place where you even don't realize that you have you've had a meal in your table. You have family and friends that care. It blinds you to points that you do not even realize that even though you didn't have a job for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, you're still alive and kicking. So that puts you in a position where you're depressed.
Sure.
Gets you to a position where you don't want to play football. It gets you to a position where you probably have sleepless nights, or as commonly known, insomnia, whatever your English teacher taught you. Or it places you in a position where you actually oversleep. Like all you want to do is just stay in bed. You don't want to see people. You have withdrawn from your friends. You don't want to talk to anyone. And that's just an example. But here we are talking about depression. Something that today in our society, when, as you stated, a 15-year-old would actually be depressed.
Sure.
And sadly enough, Sam, it's not just a 15-year-old. If you look at society, even an 8-year-old could be depressed. And it's crazy.
Yeah. And you know one thing, it is sad by the fact that we have come to believe this misconception. Like the example that you gave, I would want to live a life that I can't. Now, it is sad to believe this misconception that if I have money, if I succeed in life, then it means my life will be pretty. Then it means all will be well. And that is for let me call them the non-believers. For the Christians, it is sad for them to believe that if I have Jesus, then life will be smooth. Then yeah, I mean everything. Exactly. You see, that's what they preach, prosperity gospel. I mean, ukikuja kwa Yesu ndio utapata gari, ndio utapata nyumba, si ndio?
Na bibi kama una. Sawa, kuja kwa Yesu utapata bibi.
So come to Jesus and get a wife and get a car. That's what they preach, and then your life will be pretty. But I would like to say that that's a misconception. I mean, King David himself, a man after
God's
own heart. King David himself, I mean, he was downcast. He went through a lot of troubles, a lot of pain. Jesus himself, while he was here on earth, he went through a lot of troubles. We've been studying the book of Corinthians here, and we get to see, in fact, the second letter to the church in Corinth, that is 2 Corinthians chapter 1, Apostle Paul openly shares about the struggles and the afflictions that he and other Christians were going through. So it means, I mean, for me, one of the comforting thing as a believer is the fact that, I mean, there are many people like me who go through what I go through. But one comforting thing that also Paul states in 2 Corinthians chapter 1 is that God comforts us in our afflictions. You see, that is very key. God comforts us in our afflictions, not from our afflictions. You know, we tend to think that the only way God would comfort us is to remove the afflictions, is to remove the pain. But the Bible says God comforts us in our afflictions, in our troubles, in our struggles. When you're in that struggle, the recognition of God's comfort is what matters. So God comforts us. That's number one thing for me to get to understand as a believer, even during this depression time. Yes, because struggles will come, pain will come, afflictions will come, but then God comforts us in our afflictions.
Yeah, and just to think about it, probably you're out there and you're a believer and you're at a position where you're thinking, so why am I, pressed, crushed down, burdened and all that? But this whole conversation, truth is, it cuts across all ages, all races, all gender, and wherever. Like it does not state, because you're this age, I won't come to you. But with the kind of information and the exposure we have today, like it's easy for someone just to fall down. And thinking about it, Sammy, this whole COVID season, I remember there's a time last year it was stated that the number of depression has gone high, very, very high. And I remember it was actually stated that even in the, what are they known as, in Madare, there was a increase of guys who went due to mental health, or they just needed help. Antidepressants was sold so much. And it's in real sense, it actually is very possible. You probably lost your job. Just thinking about it, we've been going through a series in church which was titled Abundant Lessons from the Desert Place. And I'm thinking at that particular desert place, as we think of it, it's the point of where most of us tend to fall into depression. At that particular desert place, it's, you know, where you've lost your job, where you're struggling to even pay rent or even find food. But the beauty of this whole conversation is that as a believer, we have a God who's faithful and he knows about it. And you know, the way in the Bible, we know that the Bible is God's word to man, and it's a guide for us to follow. He gives us examples of very, very prominent, like a better word, men of God and women who fell into depression.
Sure.
And in the Bible, we can see like this word is depression, but he uses, you know, words that we mentioned earlier on. I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking of Job, Sammy. You mentioned David. I love David. Man, that guy. Anyway, I can't wait to see him in heaven and just say, Sasa David. But think of Job, a rich man who's well off, who's well kept, and then one day he just wakes up and everything is gone. His beautiful family, the kids, all the wealth he had, his wife. Actually, before even the wife dies, the wife looks at him and tells him, so you just curse this God. You know, like let go of him. That's a sign of a depressed woman in the Bible. And think about him where he was at. Isn't this a situation where we have people around us who are experiencing the same? And the story of Job further continues that, you know, he not only struggled with, he not only experienced this, but even his own friends pinpointed on him. Like, MC, you've tended the dhambi. And I like the story of Job because it helps us see a few of also the myths that we have in regards to depression. Because, you know, it's something that not people will be openly confident enough to state that I went to hospital and they stated I have depression. But when you look at the story of Job, we can see some of the myths as to why people who are struggling with depression won't be able to speak it out. It's because we will probably point it out as though you are going through this particular season because you have unconfessed sins, you know, or God is angry at you. That's what we would think of if we came to know that someone's going through a season in their life. That's pano, hiyo ni pano kutoka kwa God. But in real sense, it's not necessarily that. But this is Job's life. So he's there and the friends come and tell him of how it's a punishment from God. And he even gets to a point where he is downcast, Sammy, to a point where he looks up and states that why did I not perish at birth then? You know, and just die at that time. Why was I born if you knew you'd take me through this particular season? And, you know, he was at a place where he had no peace and quietness in his soul. And looking at Job and how his story builds up, it gives me courage and confidence that no matter how dark a season I am experiencing, that there's still hope for tomorrow. So this should be an encouragement to you out there.
Sure.
And I hope that you will be that friend who won't be pushing your friend down because of the season they're at. That we will be able to pull each other up, Sammy. Imagine now I come to you, umeachwa, unalia, unaumia, alafu mimi nakam tu zangu ni Sammy, the reason as to why you were left, you know why? Do you know why that girl left you? It's all because of you.
Hizi tabia zako mbaya mbaya.
Uchoyo, uogi.
naoganga rada we wacha bana.
You know,
Eh,
instead of being that comfort, or it's okay, Sammy, you're hurting. You know, he's a God who mends the broken heart.
sure,
You know,
sure.
and yeah, that's part of what I'm thinking about depression.
I think in line to that, it's actually very nice what you said, and it's actually good to note that God cares. I think many people forget that. You see, we tend to say that everything happens for a reason, which is true. Everything happens for a purpose. But we forget the fact that despite God bringing things in our lives to happen for a purpose, He still cares for us. He's still, He's still merciful to us. He's still compassionate about us. Because even, I think it's Peter chapter 5. First Peter chapter 5 from verse 6 to 8, where he talks of casting my burdens to him because he cares. I mean, I like how Peter brings it. He shows that in fact, he says that worry is pride, so I should humble myself and cast all my anxieties to God because he cares. And that teaches me that, when Jesus Christ died on the cross, he not only died for my sin, to take away my sin, but he also died for my temporal needs here on earth because he cares. It's not just about eternity so that I have eternal life, but it's also about as I live here on earth, he takes good care of me. I mean, that's why even in Philippians it says I should take everything with thanksgiving and supplication to God, and he will give me peace because he cares. So one, he cares. Two, most of the times, I know there are places where we feel like the only comfort, it's tears. We just have to cry. I've been to places, I know. In fact, they say men don't cry. I want to tell you here on air, we cry tena vibaya sana. Kwanza si tunalianga vibaya. In fact, ours is bad.
So will you allow me to laugh if I feel before I comfort you?
For you guys, in fact, it's better. You can just sit and just tears.
The tears just
but for us, man, we cry like for real.
But I believe it's very okay.
Yes,
it's very, very okay.
Now, if there are moments where I'm so down that I have to cry, just remember that God cares. And he not only cares, he will never leave you. You see, that's the point. He promised us that he will never leave us, even when we cry, even during tribulation or anything. The only time God has ever forsaken a child is on the cross. That's when we heard Jesus Christ himself crying out, "Why have you forsaken me?" And you know why in fact Jesus was forsaken at that point? So that he will never forsake us. In fact, that was for us, so that he will never forsake us because of our sin. So the only time God has forsaken a child was his only begotten son, and it was for us, so that we will not forsake him. So he is there for us. He cares for us. Yeah.
And you mentioned you're going through the book of Corinthians. Actually, we are now doing 2 Corinthians. And Paul is the other guy I'd want to meet in heaven. It's not like I just want to meet guys. I also want to meet the adulterous woman. I also want to meet the Samaritan woman. I also want to meet Mary, mother of Jesus.
You don't want to meet Solomon, or you're scared to meet Solomon?
Hey, that's one.
Anaweza kukatia hadi
Anyway, I also want to meet that guy and just ask him how. No, I just want to get to know, so what broke you to the point of, stating that all of that was vanity?
At the end.
Yeah, like how do you state that? But anyway, back to Paul. In 2 Corinthians chapter 12, from verse 7, he says that even though I have received such wonderful revelations from God, so to keep me from becoming proud, I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger from Satan to torment me and keep me from becoming proud. 3 different times I begged the Lord to take it away. Each time he said, my grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness. So now I am glad to boast about my weakness, so that the power of Christ can work through me. That's why I take pleasure in my weaknesses and in the insults, hardships, persecutions, and troubles that I suffer for Christ. For when I am weak, then I am strong. And think about this, Sammy. This is Paul. Aki Paul. You know, the writer of the episodes. Like, that guy, he's a... I don't know, it's not an author. He's a letterer. You know? Because he did letters. But thinking of this, Sammy, when you look at his life, but he can confidently state that, you know, I have asked of the Lord to remove this thorn from me. And oftentimes the Lord kept it away from me. Kept it on for 3 times. Analenga to siati ajui. But he knows. And this is just on a perspective where sometimes we go through situations that God has allowed us to. And these situations are to sanctify us, are to build us. And it does not mean that when we are facing all the hardships, it's God who's working in us. No. But my friend desires that we shall not miss to realize that even in that hard place, in that tough place, we will not forget God. We will remember a God who has been faithful all through. And that we will realize that we can always have a conversation with him in that tough place. And looking at how Paul places it, that each time the Lord stated, my grace is all you need. My power works best in your weakness. So this is an encouragement to us that through all that is happening, that God's grace is sufficient for us. His strength is made perfect in our weakness. And Paul states it in a very interesting way that, you know, I take pleasure in my weaknesses. Think of weaknesses, Sammy. How many of us are going through a tough time because we have weaknesses? We don't like how we walk. We don't like how we talk. We don't like how we are not able to do things. We don't like how in the society we are not in the range of the people who are in the billboards because probably they're cute and skinny and light-skinned, or they're not bald. Okay, yeah, you can also find baldness as a weakness, but you're not thick, or like there's so many things that society will define as weaknesses. And some of them could also go down to I am poor in mathematics, and that's a weakness. And we tend to fall into depression because we can't change that situation. Like, we are sorry and pitiful about ourselves. We are focused on it so much that we can't eat because I didn't get a 98 out of 100 in maths. You know. And he goes ahead and states, and in the insults, how many of us are depressed because of what has been happening to us? Think about the number of stories of people out there who have fallen into depression because of words that have been said to them. Think about the number of stories we've heard of relatives, families, in-laws, and the nasty things that they do amongst each other and the nasty words that they say to each other. And you just find that someone is down in a dark place. They're troubled. Think about even in here as a missionary organization, the number of words and insults we tell each other in a very polite way. You know, and we do not realize that we are breaking someone or we are placing them in a state. And because they're not in a position to speak it out, they put it in themselves and they fill themselves with all the anger and unforgiveness and all the bitterness at heart, and it builds up to self-pity, and it builds up to anxiety. It builds up to not being able to function well. It builds up to being lazy, and yeah, you're just in a certain place.
Sure.
Persecutions and hardships and troubles, like these are some of the things that build up to depression. But Paul says that I suffer for Christ, for when I am weak, then I am strong. Because it's not my strength, but it's in him. And this probably will be an encouragement to a believer. However, one thing that I also believe is that even through such times where people are experiencing the dark places, we still have a chance to seek out for help. Now that we're in a society where we can speak out, that it has actually been termed as a sicknesses. As a sickness or a disorder. If you have anti-malarias, some you have antidepressants. And I believe that it's a good place to be at when you figure out that I need help and you go find help. Because I believe God is the giver of knowledge and wisdom, that there's a doctor who can treat that. There's someone who can identify and find a solution to it. So for me, I'd state if there are ways you can handle it if you go to a hospital and they figure out that, hey, you have depression. Please take the medication. But keep on praying and trusting in God for help. However, when we were younger, I remember my maths teacher in class 6. She was a Christian, she was a believer. And every single day she'd come to class. Aki, God bless her soul, Mrs. Wambua. She'd come to class and we heard to say the verse, arise and shine for the light has come. Every single time. But one thing that I remember about this particular woman, teacher, mother, she could identify issues in the class. She could come and she could tell that probably she didn't sleep well last night, or he probably is experiencing something hard. And every time that you had not done an assignment, she was not fast to beating you up. I don't know why. At that time, we didn't even know about depressions or, being affected by what's happening in my family. My dad and mom are going through a divorce. At that time, it wasn't a problem. It won't be wrapped up as something that is affecting a kid who's in grade 6. And one thing she used to state often was, a problem shared is halfway solved. And I sure believe in that, Sammy. If there's something that you're going through, I believe we can always find someone to talk to. A friend, a brother, someone you can trust. And if you can't find that person, pray to God, talk to God. Just talk it out. Because you share it. And for me, I believe those are some of the things you can do.
Sure. And one of the practical help that you could get when you go through depression, because it gets tough. But I'm reminded of one story from the Bible that when Jesus heard about when John the Baptist was beheaded. John the Baptist was a cousin to Jesus. And it hit on Jesus. Jesus was, I would call it ultimate depressed at some point. And Jesus had to go to a desolate place and grieved. So for me, that's one of the biggest lessons, even when I get depression. It's okay to grieve. It's okay to cry about it. It's okay to take a moment. Take an off day when you go through something. Sometimes it's really tough. There are places where you could have had cases. Someone, is suffering from a heartbreak. That's one. He lost his job at the same time. Then he loses a loved one. Such cases, it's okay to grieve. It's okay to shout. It's okay to cry. Take 2 weeks of an off day. But then again, as much as it's okay to grieve, as much as it's okay to cry, you don't stay there grieving for 3 years. like you're crying for 4 years. You're crying about loss of a loved one for 4 years. No. When you stay in that cocoon, now it becomes a problem. Now that's depression. You see, that's depression and you need help. And one of the ways that you've talked of is sharing. And in fact, the Bible reminds us that we should weep with those who weep. So find this ones, mourn who those who mourn. Now find this special person who you can freely share. I know at this time and age, it's actually difficult and tough to share things with people. Because today I come and tell you my problem, I come and tell you my struggle. Tomorrow, it's in the news. And it brings about embarrassment. People get judgmental to you, and it becomes tough. And I regret sharing. So in fact,
and then it pulls you down more.
Exactly, then it pulls me down more. That's one of the problems as to why, in fact, people suffer depression, because there are no avenues for people to share. I mean, we've not laid out proper platforms for people to share. I mean, it's hard for someone to even trust me and come and tell me, because he knows the next day I will tell so and so about it. And it's even difficult. So as much as it's important to share, I mean, like you said, problem shared is half solved. But then again, I want to pose a challenge to people that, I mean, sometimes I don't get it. I don't understand why you have to share my stuff with others. Well, I don't know whether because gossip is beautiful, or I don't know, it's sweet, not beautiful. Is it because gossip is sweet? Or you want to make me look bad? Because there's no one who is perfect. Or you just want to embarrass me, because I don't get it. Sometimes I would have a friend, I share them, I tell them my struggle, I'm going through this and that. A few days later, talk of I'm the laughing stock around the mtaa. And it's tough and hard. So I want to pose a challenge to people there, that they lay out avenues, they lay out platforms where you could have someone come to you and share their story. I mean, if you want to stop this suicide things that we hear, I mean, this suicide rally that people are committing suicide as early as 15. I mean, I'm 15 and I'm committing suicide. In fact, in my culture, this African culture, at 15 kwanza unaambiwanga we ujui kitu. So I wonder
but watoto wa siku hizi sasa hata miaka 8 wanajua yani.
So it's quite funny at 15 you're depressed and you commit suicide. It's okay, not funny but sad, and I don't know.
But as I mentioned it, Sammy, besides just the African culture, when you look in the book of Acts, when Acts chapter 2 towards the end, it basically is a story about the first unity of believers, like the first church and the likes. And when you look how the Bible states it, from verse 42 downwards, it states of how they lived in a community where they shared meals, they prayed together, they fellowshipped together, and my burdens were your burdens, and your burdens were my burden, and not just mine, but the communities. And I'm imagining if that's the kind of society we'd have today. Sammy, would we be speaking of depression?
I don't think so, because it would be easy for me to share.
Because I believe that it's something that God knows about, and He knows even how to take care of it. And I believe He even had in mind before it even came to pass. Because imagining that if you say some of the ways we can curb depression is by finding people to talk to, by what is it known as? By finding someone to talk to, by allowing ourselves to grieve. And something else I know we could state is that also finding something to do. A common statement that we have is that an idle mind is the devil's workshop. And definitely if you're in a place where you do not have any concrete work or anything concrete to do, you'll be having weird, strange ideas that will just pull you down. That's when you have time to think of how, man, if I had a good job, I will be having a house in Kilimani, I will be having a car, I will, I had planned by the time I'm 30, I need to have 4 babies, and a wife and all these things, and it's not happening. Like, that's what it builds up.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just thinking of how when okay, that's from Acts, on how God brought up a fellowship of believers and how they live together. I'm thinking about it, Sammy. Do you think God had a reason when He created Adam? Like,
Mm-hmm.
he created everything in the Garden of Eden,
Mm-hmm.
and then He placed Adam there
Mm-hmm.
and gave him work.
Mm-hmm.
And gave him work. So imagine if Adam was just brought there without a wife, without Eve, and without work to do. And the only person he's meeting up with is God. And we don't know how often God was there to have conversations with them. Because, when, they're found in saying, we are told that when God came.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know from where.
Mm-hmm.
But imagine if Adam was to stay there by himself.
Come and watch game.
Without work,
Mm-hmm.
without anything.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been messed up, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So for me, I feel like God had a thought about it before. So He gave Adam a work.
Mm-hmm.
And afterwards, He looked at him and said, hey, this human being will be lonely. So He gave him a companion.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the story continues. But for me, I believe that it's very important to have people around you
Very important.
that you need to have a union with, that you need to have a relationship with, that you need to fellowship with, people that you can speak out with. And I believe no matter how ugly the world would look like, no matter how bad it could be, we still can find at least one or two people that we can always talk to.
I believe they're there.
And then secondly, just being able to acknowledge and accept the situations where we're going through and allowing ourselves to walk through them. If you feel like crying, cry. If you feel like you're not able to do something, don't push yourself too hard. If you feel I am not capable of going to a crowd today, and you genuinely know that it will be helpful for you, then just embrace that. But don't keep it to yourself. Speak out on whatever is happening around you. And something else, just don't allow your mind to be a devil's workshop.
Sure. Yeah, as iron sharpens iron, so a friend sharpens a friend.
Yeah,
So-
Roman does.
Yes, so I believe it's one of the most reasons, or rather one of the most important reasons why we have friends around, to make us better, to be there for us, to carry burdens for us, to help us with each and every struggle that we go through, which is very important. And now, there's another thing that I'm thinking that could cause depression. Have you been in a place where maybe you like cheated or something? Probably ulifanya kama corruption, or you did something wrong that you're not supposed to do. Maybe for the people who are dating or married, cheated on your girlfriend, your boyfriend, or your spouse, and then there's that guilty conscience that disturbs you. That could also bring you depression.
Unconfessed sin.
Exactly, unconfessed sin. Then you feel like you're unworthy of love, you're unworthy of redemption because of the unconfessed sin. And just like you put it, the solution to that is definitely confess it. Then it removes the guilt that we have. Because now, for believers, Romans says that for there is no condemnation for those that are in Christ Jesus.
Yeah.
Because, everything has been paid already. So as much as you did wrong, as much as you made a mistake, confess it. Ask for forgiveness and move on. Don't consistently stick to that wrongdoing or that sin that you did. Don't consistently stick to that. And Romans also in chapter 8 talks of, chapter 5, verse 8 says, while we were still sinners, God demonstrated his love to us. While we were still sinners, while we are still doing this wrong. So meaning, by the fact that I'm here, that I did wrong, God has already demonstrated his love to us. So do not feel that you're condemned. Yes, you sinned. But what do I need to do? Confess it.
Mm-hmm.
Confess it to people. And if we get to live as a community, it would be easier for people to confess to each other. It would be easier for me to go to a friend and confess my sins to them. I tell them, man, Bana, yesterday, what I did last night, it's unforgivable. But yeah, here I am. Please pray for me. Please walk with me. Please help me. And then we get better together. But unfortunately, we are not giving ourselves this avenue, this platform to share with one another, because everyone is judgmental. When I come to you, you will see how bad I am. I'm scared of that. I'm scared of telling you my problems, my struggles, because you'll be like, Periti will be like, na huyu wate huyu. Kumbe hivi ndio anakuaga. And then I die in depression all by myself. But I want to appeal to everyone this evening, to pose a challenge to everyone. Confess. Confess all your sins. It is well. Yeah.
From what I'm getting, Sammy, you just brought up the thought of depression builds up or rather feeds from shame. Like, it's shameful to state you're depressed, or it's shameful, it's a shameful act that you did that leads you to it.
Sure.
And it builds up. I believe also there's fear, like if I tell Sammy, how will he look at me? If I share it out, how will I be handled? And at the end of the day, you're just in a state.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I believe we can wrap it up at that.
In fact, actually something came to my mind, thinking about King David yet again. This guy, he sleeps with someone's wife. Then because of shame, he kills the husband. That is because of shame. And because he's going through depression, he's wondering, now when people know, or rather when this husband knows that I slept with his wife, and in fact his wife is pregnant, it's tough. And then he decides to kill. You see, that for me is depression. So the moment, actually I think it's Psalms chapter 32, it talks of David was struggling because he did not confess the sin. He did not talk about it. So he was struggling. I think there's a word that is used there, rotten, or my bones were something like rotten. And the best thing that David had to do was to confess his sin. And then all was well. Yes.
And also still just David in Psalms 40, he gives a whole, like it's a whole psalm of a depressed person, of how he was in a miry clay, he was in a bad place. But I like how he finalizes it in Psalms 40, verse 16 and 17. But may all who search for you be filled with joy and gladness in you. May those who love your salvation repeatedly shout, the Lord is great. As for me, since I am poor and needy, let the Lord keep me in his thoughts. You are my helper and my savior. Oh my God, do not delay. And probably that's your prayer out there. Be encouraged that he's a God who hears, he's a God who sees, he's a God who answers, he's a God who speaks, and he's a God who restores, and he's a God who builds and mends the brokenhearted.
Sure.
So be encouraged that it is not something that is supposed to place us in a shameful pit, or we're supposed to be stuck on it, but he's a God who raises up from a miry clay and sets your feet on a solid rock.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think I found the verse, Psalms 32, verse 3. David says, when I kept silent, my bones wasted away through my groaning all day long. For day and night your hand was heavy on me. I mean, he felt the burden in his heart because he was silent about it. My strength was sapped as in the heat of summer. Then verse 5 now is the epitome of this chapter. It says, then I acknowledged my sin to you, and I did not cover up my iniquity. I said, I will confess my transgressions to the Lord, and you forgave the guilt of my sin. Therefore, let all the faithful pray to you while you may be found. Surely the rising of the mighty waters will not reach them. So if you're there, out there, and probably your depression is being caused by shame, I mean, you feel like what I did was wrong, what I did was unforgivable. David says, then I acknowledged my sin to you and did not cover up my iniquity. I will confess. So then I urge you, confess, and you'll be safe.
So thank you, guys. Yeah, we hope that we shall all find solace in God. We shall all find strength in Him, and that we shall grow to get to the point, as Paul stated it, and always be kept reminded that His grace is sufficient for us, and His strength is made perfect in our weaknesses. So be blessed. Have a blessed week. Have an amazing time. To Onani.
Thursday. Good night.
Good night.